And this is related to infrastructure. So numerous studies indicate that much of Ontario's public infrastructure has surpassed or is soon to surpass its life expectancy, resulting in crumbling bridges and sinkholes in the roads, thus jeopardizing the public safety. In its latest budget tabled in March, the Ontario government announced that in addition to spending around $12.8 billion in 2011-2012 and $35 billion in total over the next 3 years on building highways, transit, hospitals, school buildings, and other civil works, it would pay $8.2 billion towards a new underground transit line in Toronto. So this leads us to the question of infrastructure in support of cities, which is related to that comment, and our broader discussion is, what is your position on infrastructure renewal in Ontario and the role of the federal government to support infrastructure needs? And I think, Jean-Luc, it's your time to start off.
All right. In my particular riding, and I told you who it is earlier, but this pattern exists all across the country, across all party lines. The person who is currently sitting in your federal position will espouse about how they helped make a bridge happen, or how they helped improve the roads, or how they helped pay for sewer system renewal. It boggles my mind how a federal politician could be involved in that at all. The Green Party's approach is very simple. You have to get federal politicians out of municipal projects. So we would take a full percentage point off the GST, and I'm trying to remember exactly what the fraction is, but a sizable portion off of the gasoline tax, and direct it towards municipalities. Every part of the country is within a municipality. Even the tar sands is within a municipality called Wood Buffalo. We would send that funding to the municipalities in a consistent and transparent way so that municipalities themselves could plan out their own infrastructure, and we would never have to have a federal politician stand up and say, I helped make this bridge happen. Now, for provinces, their primary responsibility for example, highways and certain other forms of infrastructure, a similar arrangement can be made as well, because again, why are federal politicians involved if the infrastructure isn't traversing provincial boundaries? It boggles my mind. So if we had consistent, transparent funding for infrastructure projects at municipal level as well as at the provincial level, then you get fewer cooks in the kitchen, and you'd actually get more things done. And with the consistent funding, provinces and municipalities would be able to get loans at the lower interest rates that are usually only available to federal projects. So that, in short, is the answer. And the answer is, if I were elected, I would want to get my hands away from that and focus only on infrastructure projects that are of national interest, interprovincial grid interconnects, the Great Lakes, perhaps, because it is of national interest.
All right, well, thank you very much. Ray, over to you.
Well, okay, so with regards to infrastructure renewal in Ontario, a Liberal government has created the gas tax transfer, delivering $2 billion per year to Canadian cities to invest in infrastructure. Under the Harper government, interest in sound policy gave way to partisanship. The federal role in infrastructure became little more than posing for pictures with big checks in conservative-held ridings. A Liberal government will provide leadership working with other levels of government and the private sector to put in place a Canadian transportation and infrastructure strategy that targets long-term economic benefits. A Liberal government will bring clarity and coherence to the federal role in infrastructure. It's about investing for long-term results on major Canadian objectives, such as international trade competitiveness, regional development, economic growth and modernization, urban quality of life, and greenhouse gas and other pollution reduction. We will ensure access to broadband for all Canadians with a $500 million investment to achieve 100% high-speed internet access for all Canadian households within 3 years. In its first 2 years, a Liberal government will focus federal investment in affordable housing by $550 million. In addition, we will work with the provinces and territories to put in place a long-term commitment to affordable housing. Thank you.
Okay, so that's two viewpoints. Again, we know there's two other sets of viewpoints that are silent right now, so it will behoove us as good engineers to do our research to look at all of those other options. I'll go to the floor for some questions.
We just heard a very good comment that basically support in terms of financing and investment in terms of money. But how do you perceive do you going to provide federal government support in technical matters or in expertise, either in the management, the development of the technologies, or the deployment of those technologies in a sound manner? I.e., how many experts do you expect to be from the federal to help the municipalities and the province?
Okay, so a question around people. Now, we're actually going to come to that. We have a question about supporting, but why don't we just take a few seconds on that so we don't lose it, and we'll come back to that, I think, in a very specific question. Jean-Luc, if you have a thought.
Sure. There are lots of examples where there are expertise at the federal level where these people would be well served to assist municipalities and provinces in their particular infrastructure projects. The examples that immediately come to mind would be aviation for aviation expertise to help with perhaps construction or uplifting of airports, understanding of airplane traffic routes, international trade, international security regulations, this sort of thing. I can't speak specifically to numbers. I don't have any myself. All I know is the Green Party's consistent approach to this would be to always consult those who know best and try to come to an answer. Now, it could be that provinces want more of their people involved in the decision process, and the feds will want more of their people. But there is a degree of consensus that comes together. For example, Transport Canada and Infrastructure Canada are often working together with provinces to plan out a lot of the Canada's Action Plan construction projects that have been going on. And they're always fully aware of the different projects that are in flight or at least planned at the different provincial levels. So I would not want to see too many of those people let go in the coming years, to be honest with you. I think it's very important. There's a strong pattern where investment in infrastructure would immediately pay dividends not only within the first few years but within the next several decades. So infrastructure planning in, as I mentioned earlier, consistent, transparent manner, as well as support with expertise would be absolutely necessary.
Okay. I don't know if
I'll
you have
pass
something.
a comment. I'm not sure it's totally the Liberal position, but I think that there's a great deal of expertise today within the federal government, and often it's not tapped, or often it's sort of kind of contained and not spread out or implemented. It's not that there couldn't be more, but the federal government has a number of departments with which I'm always amazed with the amount of material and information they have internally, which is very difficult to access or to get a hold of if you're not within the federal government or of that department. So I think they should be more open with regards to that. The other aspect is I think there's been a trend, at least I've seen the trend over the last number of years, where the federal government, at least in other areas, not necessarily in infrastructure, has transferred the responsibility to the province and saying is, the responsibility is the provincial one, and we will transfer some money accordingly. Maybe I'm being a bit of a critic, but sometimes I see they transfer the responsibility and yet they still maintain some departments at the federal level with huge number of employees or relatively large numbers. And so, it's hard to say how you can have a federal government department with sort of thousands or 10,000 employees and still transfer the responsibility to the province. It doesn't answer your question directly, but it's an observation.
So I think your asking the question confirms that this is a matter of importance, particularly in this part of the country. I think that's duly noted, so thank you very much for that. We do have a question over here as well.
Bill Spruan from APENS. I read the question as, what is the government's position on infrastructure renewal? I have to question that since the federal government does not recognize the need for engineers in Canada or architects in Canada be members of their associations. They consider themselves, the federal government, to be above provincial law. So how can our federal government comment on structures, on infrastructure, bridges, roads, whatever, if their people are not qualified. And my follow-up question is, what would your position be about having all engineers and architects registered in order to practice engineering in Canada?
Thank you for that very wonderful question. Well, Jean-Luc, you have an opportunity.
All right, all right. So speaking as an unregistered engineer myself, I do not have my PEng. And the reason basically came to is that I was never doing work that needed as course my PEng certification. My business is in information security and data cryptography, which you would think would require a PEng certification. Unfortunately, none of the clients I dealt with had a requirement to have a PEng certification to secure their networks. But the computer space is often not seen as life-threatening, or not seen as, incorrectly I might add, not seen as being necessary for the interests of public health and safety. I personally would like to see that changed. Now, if the problem is that within the federal government, it's often more of a bureaucratic situation, and they're looking for people with expertise, not with design sign-off. And provincially anyway, the PEO, correct me if I'm wrong here, but in university they explained to me that you need your PEng if ever you want to sign off on a design, or if you want to, or if you were asked to review an architecture or a plan and say, yes, this will meet the requirements for safety and for structural integrity. A bureaucrat evaluating an infrastructure plan does not need that level of certification, because I don't believe it's within the Engineering Act of Canada.
So I'll just comment, because you've hit on a huge issue. So just to kind of add to this, the industrial exemption is something that PEO and OSPI had been working, and without going into the details, the concept was if you had a master of a facility, those working under them within the facility didn't have to have their professional registration. So the idea was perhaps in the federal government, and I think this is the concept, that if you do have a professional engineer at the top, you might have 1,000 engineers, and I think this may be a similar. Is that the right, am I on the right nickel here? So, well, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So the topic being, though, is there's the ability to say we can go ahead and do this work without being a professionally registered individual. Like, that's the point, right? And there's a number of people who are saying that's not correct. Public safety is one aspect of this. And given the complexity, the scope, and the range of duties, how could one imagine everyone is not registered? So that's kind of really what the topic is, right? So that's been put forward, and it's a great question, and I think this is something that the engineering community is looking for some answers. And that's something that I think is going to be a hot issue. This is actually a great time to talk about it. I wish we had the full range of parties here.
I wish there were more engineering candidates from the other parties, period.
You need room up there?
You're right. I guess we need to look at the definition of what it means to practice engineering. When I develop software that uses ciphers for integrity and for confidentiality, am I practicing engineering, or is it computer science? When someone is reviewing a design for a bridge that was stamped by an engineer for funding, is he being a bureaucrat or is he being an engineer?